Good day, Francis. I am currently at home. My wife called out from the entrance, her voice indicating excitement. We both work at the same institution and are returning from the office. She and the property management department work in the physics department. I am in the kitchen. I responded without much enthusiasm. What are you doing at home, Sophia? Her question remained unanswered, and her voice wavered as she observed my luggage adjacent to the internal entrance that leads to our attached garage. Her head slowly moved in my direction, and she gave me a bewildered look. What is going on? She inquired. It seems like a considerable amount of luggage for a last-minute conference. She attempted to make a joke, but I was unresponsive. In all the years I have been presenting quantum mechanics classes, this appears to be the first time I have truly brought my work home. I have been grading student papers and teaching classes via Zoom, but this is the first occasion on which I have done so with quantum theory. She was unpleasantly surprised by the level of vitriol. In my statements, as well as in their intrinsic rudeness, I listened. I was unsure of the meaning of the statements or the rationale behind the use of such language. I was also uncertain of the relevance of quantum mechanics in this context. I widened my eyes and looked at her with a feigned expression of shock. I repeated the question about the relevance of quantum mechanics. It describes how everything works, from your phone to your body and everything else in the world. As I previously described to you, the Schrödinger's cat paradox is as follows: in a box, the cat is assumed to be either alive or dead, as one cannot interact with it. From a physical standpoint, it is therefore both alive and dead until one opens the box to find out. I applauded her, and we proceeded to discuss superposition. She then asked about quantum entanglement. I recall you discussing that when I inquired about quantum computers, but I have forgotten the specifics of the discussion. To be frank, I found the topic somewhat perplexing. I would like to inquire as to why we are discussing this now. What does all of this mean for your luggage? I leaned back in my chair, indicating to the other chair that I was open to further discussion. She approached and sat. In my laboratory, I announced the development of a gadget that generates entangled electrons in a superposition state. Both electrons can be in one of two states, or they can be comparable but not identical. However, as we begin testing one of them to identify its state, the other immediately loses its superposition status, measuring that the state of the system still affects the state of the other system. I found this explanation satisfactory and smiled. Einstein described this phenomenon as spooky action at a distance. Carol, my wife, merely glanced at me, seemingly bewildered by my discussion of these complex and unintelligible issues with her luggage. She interjected impatiently, "I'm getting there." He abruptly corrected Zahir, immediately straightening up. She recoiled with evident astonishment. I then proceeded to elaborate further. When we married, our lives were inextricably linked. Your state influenced mine, and vice versa. Indeed, I observed the color draining from her cheeks. She then mumbled, "Please allow me to include my explanation in my own style." I interrupted. She leaned back in her chair, visibly displeased. I, on the other hand, continued my explanation in a composed manner. If we consider my marital status in purely quantum mechanical terms, I can be seen as an entangled particle in a superposition state, with my condition dependent on the actions of others. Rather than remaining in a state of superposition, she shook her head once more, her demeanor indicating desperation. I am uncertain as to the specific actions that were taken or the precise scenario that unfolded. Could you please clarify the matter at hand? I adopted a gentler tone. It's quite straightforward. If you are the unfaithful partner, I believe you are. I then placed a large envelope on the table in front of her and stated, "I am a lonely man." I proceeded to inquire about a phone call that occurred earlier that day. I expressed regret for my actions and suggested that I would unpack my luggage and invite her to dinner to apologize. I then narrowed my eyes and sent a penetrating look at her across the kitchen table. Carol gazed at the envelope as if she were considering its contents. If it were a venomous snake waiting to strike, she eventually shifted her gaze to me. I informed her that I would be departing the following day for my annual Valentine's Day seminar, which would mark our first separation in 6 years of cohabitation and 4 years of legal marriage. I continued, noting her swallowing action and the darting of her eyes away from me. Subsequently, I contacted the conference hotel and requested the delivery of a floral arrangement to your room. I considered this to be an appropriate gesture for my wife, Carol. She appeared uneasy, shifting her weight and twisting her body as if uncomfortable in her seat. However, the hotel receptionist incorrectly assumed that I was the man with whom Carol had shared her room. She then offered a compliment, stating that the gesture of sending flowers was a beautiful one. She said that she would personally deliver the arrangement to your room as a surprise while both of you were in the conference hall. Carol began to stutter and attempted to provide an explanation that seemed plausible. I interrupted her with a raised hand and a "It was evident that you and Craig had settled into room 238 as usual." She sat silently, staring at her hands and anxiously twisting the ring on her finger, apparently unwilling to initiate the subject first. Therefore, I prompted her with the following question: "What about Craig?" Carol's voice sounded steady when she responded, "We studied together at university. We went on several dates. We slept together a few times. However, there was no real spark between us. It was simply casual sex." I then inquired as to the length of time that had elapsed since their last encounter. She replied, 4 years ago." I was startled. He subsequently commenced employment with the housing association in a similar role. We subsequently encountered one another by chance. She regarded me with a serious expression. It would appear that, at that moment, she was unaware of the significance of our meeting. Indeed, if I am to be entirely candid, she appeared to be preoccupied with her own thoughts. During the day, she sat with her hands folded in her lap, as though she were powerless to affect the situation. During the evening, we proceeded to an establishment where we imbibed a few beverages. As the evening progressed, she became emotional, and tears began to flow from her eyes. I then returned to his room for coffee. At that juncture, she raised her hand to her eyes. Her eyes were filled with tears, yet she had the courage to meet my gaze. I spent the night in contemplation. Carol sniffled and wiped her eyes. I remained leaning back in my chair, arms crossed across my chest. My presence seemed to have no impact on her confession. She replied, "I just got married, and he was engaged." We both felt horrible, but we agreed that if you never found out, no one would be injured. I stepped in at that exact moment. Perhaps if you had confessed to me back then, the situation might have unfolded differently. I might have forgiven you, but I am unsure. There was a chance, but this year on Valentine's Day, she looked sad, biting her lip while nodding. The following year, we got separate rooms, but the excitement of this secret only came once a year. The meeting was too powerful to resist, and we slept together again last year. I reserved a regular room, which always has double occupancy, and he paid the additional fee for lodging using his credit card. The card this year was meant to be the last. Craig's wife recently informed him that she is pregnant, and we discussed the possibility of starting a family. Her gentle words were abruptly interrupted by Carol's gaze, which had a discernible intensity. She glanced at me as if hoping that something she said might mitigate her betrayal. I was on the verge of confronting her when her phone rang. She retrieved her phone from her bag to end the call, but, as she struggled to do so, she noticed who was on the other end of the line. In an attempt to reach her, Carol's eyes widened in amazement. "This is Craig," she sniffed, "but he knows not to phone me while I'm at home. What we did was solely at the conference, and we never laughed at you or his wife. It was simply meaningless sex. We never phoned each other." She repeated with irritated bewilderment, "Perhaps he's attempting to warn you that I already know about you." I speculated, "But how did he know that?" She asked, then tripped. Her exclamation caught his attention. She was struck with the realization that he had informed his wife. She whispered in terror but managed to push the cancel button first. I nodded in agreement. Jenna and I had discussed the matter at length earlier that day. It was evident that starting a family was intended to signal the end of his extramarital activities. My knowledge was the final straw for her. In fact, during our conversation, she mentioned quitting the Jenna does not intend to become a single mother. "How did you locate her?" she inquired quietly. It was quite straightforward. I informed the administrator that I intend to purchase champagne for my table because it is Valentine's Day, but I was unsure which card to use for payment. They offered me a choice, either my corporate card or one with Mr. Dayton's name. I assured them I'd make a decision later and hung up. Searching for after a brief examination of the online delegate list, I was able to ascertain the surname in question. Upon further investigation of his social media page, I discovered Craig Dayton and Jenna as his significant other. Given that he attended the same university as you, I was able to confirm my initial suspicion. I promptly texted Jenna, who called me back to discuss our problems. Carol's phone rang again, and she glanced at me quizzically. I encouraged her to answer it with a smile. She pressed. He acknowledged my presence with a brief glance and activated the loudspeaker. "What is it, Craig?" she inquired in a bland and somewhat exhausted tone. "We don't engage in these activities," he replied, speaking through the receiver. Carol grimaced upon hearing the term she dislikes, spy whisper, which reverberated throughout our kitchen. "Jenna is aware of our arrangements," he continued, addressing your husband by name. "But I'm uncertain how she obtained this information," Carol murmured, seeking my assistance. However, this was her own unfortunate situation, which she was forced to confront independently. It is likely that he informed her about our arrangement. She expressed her frustration with a deep sigh. How did he become aware of our relationship? What information has he obtained? He demanded an explanation, suggesting that he was aware of the circumstances. I seriously doubt that we can provide a satisfactory explanation. My wife emitted a derisive snort, considering that I had just revealed all the relevant details. Carol, as she mentioned, observed as I began to type a message on my phone. She continued, offering a perceptive observation, "I am almost certain he is now messaging Jenna with the latest information." In this instance, the conspiratorial tone disregards caution. He demanded that she confess to him. She simply shrugged, even though her partner could not see her. He learned about them when he wanted to do something kind for me on Valentine's Day. Her eyes were laden with tears. She stared at me. "I know he will never trust me again, and I am convinced that it is over between us. That is why I felt he deserved this final act of respect before leaving me." I passed the test and permitted his superior position. She elucidated the present circumstances to me in a meticulous manner, yet her uneducated partner, Carol, terminated the call. Craig nevertheless persisted in uttering nonsense and uncertainty. She tapped the screen several times before looking up at me and stating, in a shrug, that I had blocked him. This was of little consequence at the time, but I deemed it important for you to be aware that he could never replace you. He was merely a futile distraction on a mundane evening alone in a hotel far from home. She arose, wiped her tears with the back of her hand, and regarded the envelope, which remained on her side of the table. "I will take you to the car," she added gently, acquiescing to the inevitable. I reflected on how, had I not expressed my feelings for Carol on Valentine's Day, their relationship might have concluded on its own, and I would have remained unaware of this possibility. At that moment, I recalled another law of the cosmos. I would be grateful for your insights on this narrative. Please provide your comments on the following story. I took my seat on the plane destined for home and gazed out the window as we soared into the sky after 3 decades. I was finally returning permanently, spurred by my love for my wife, Lisa. I took out my trusty Zippo, a present from her with the inscription, "To my beloved husband, Alan." Congratulations, Maureen. Yes, that's me. Alan Roberts, aka Machine Gunnery Sergeant Alan Roberts, or simply a machine weapon. I had been robbed of another opportunity to express my feelings for Carol on Valentine's Day. The title joins the ranks of those who have retired for nearly 30 years. I wore a military uniform adorned with decorations and badges that held exclusively personal value for me. Over 10 of those years were spent in the reserves. When Lisa and I married years ago, I had already experienced everything and acquired all of the clothes I needed. I was already in good shape, having met her on the side of the road one day after work. I was a mechanic at a large car dealership in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, when I saw her car with the hood up and steam rising from the engine. I promptly identified the problem as a torn fan belt. A trip to the auto parts store and some fast repairs got her back on the road in no time. She graciously thanked me and said, "Just get home safely. Please allow me to repay you." I replied that I would be grateful for dinner and asked her if she liked Red Lobster. She agreed and jotted down her name and number. She then said, "How about Friday at 7 o'clock, M? That sounds ideal." I confirmed that Friday marked the commencement of our journey together. 8 months later, I proposed, and in 1987, we were wed. Since then, I have been content. She relocated to my residence in northern Idaho, extending her daily commute to work as a teacher in Spokane Valley by over 30 miles. We discussed the possibility of relocating closer to her place of employment, but I was reluctant to do so, as I was attached to our home, situated on 5 acres of land. Wooded Acres is situated along Interstate 95, a legacy from my parents. I intend to pass it down to our children someday, despite my monthly reserve commitments and annual training. My wife, Lisa, never complained. Her unfailing support was clear, even in the small amounts she deposited into my IRA. Our daughter, Renee, arrived approximately a year and a half into our marriage. Then, in 1990, Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait resulted in my being placed on active duty for a period exceeding 1 year. Upon my return, our son Carl was born. The events of September 11 significantly altered the trajectory of our lives. I was subsequently placed on active duty, relocating between Camp Pendleton, California and Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Lisa obtained certification to teach in both states, securing employment in various locations. My service spanned 3 tours. Iraq, 3 tours in Afghanistan, and 4 stints on Okinawa, for a total of more than 6 years. Lisa never expressed any discontent about the pressure on her and her children, but I was aware of the consequences. I vowed that this would be her final deployment at 56. I believed that desert combat was a task better suited to the young. After 30 years of service, it was time for me to return home. One might expect me to retire with a higher rank, and in some respects, I was prepared to do so. Higher rank, and you would be correct in some aspects. I was a traditional Marine, drinking with my colleagues and fiercely protecting them, even losing promotions. I relished being a dependable leader. Gunnery Sergeant Gunny won respect by taking care of his Marines. Lieutenant Colonel 1, who had previously disciplined me, attended my retirement party. We had no ill will. In fact, we had become friends and bestowed upon me a commendation that further cemented our bond. "The Corps will not be the same without you, Gunny," he replied kindly, returning his smile. I thanked him, "Colonel, but I believe it's in capable hands." Lance Corporal Dawson and his pals approached, presenting me with a gift wrapped in brown paper, just a little something to remember us by. Gunny said, grinning, as he unwrapped it. I was amused to see a hand-carved wooden hand with an extended middle finger. It evoked memories of my playful actions. Upon turning it over, I realized that he had inscribed the Marine Corps symbol and our unit designation on the back. "Did you carve it yourself, Dawson?" I inquired, with a proud smile. "Sure did," he replied, nodding. "I thought you did," I said. "It is an excellent piece of craftsmanship. I shall treasure it forever." "Thank you." As we shook hands, the other Marines applauded and clapped. I then turned to Staff Sergeant Joel Hansen, my successor as company machine gunner, and provided some suggestions. "You will look after these Marines, will you, Joel?" I inquired, shaking his hand. "I will, Gunny," he replied, smiling. "I promise you," I reassured him. "Good," he replied, smiling. I joked that if you did not, I would return and kick your back, which elicited further laughter. Rob observed that Henson is a commendable individual, Gunny. Nevertheless, no one can replace you. Take care of yourself, Gunny. It has been an honor to serve with you. After bidding farewell, I proceeded towards the exit, where the driver informed me that my belongings were ready as the aircraft descended. I came to realize that I was back in the familiar surroundings of Spokane. Below, the memories of bright days spent with Lisa and the children entered my mind as I disembarked. I searched the crowd for Lisa, having informed her of my arrival. She had not yet arrived, so I collected my belongings and hoped to see her soon. This was unusual. I contacted her again at the airport, asking where she was. I received no response. My message was immediately directed to her voicemail. I was concerned for her safety, as her parents had not heard from her either. I requested a lift from her mother, who offered to drive her home. I declined, suggesting that she might be stuck in traffic. I informed her mother that I would call her if I did not find another way home. I considered the possibility that she was unable to leave the area due to traffic congestion. However, I decided against pursuing this line of inquiry further. After driving all this way, I decided to call Alan. I was interrupted by a stranger, who inquired about my plans. I offered him a lift in a white SUV. My wife was present during this conversation. I informed him of our destination, which was Idaho. I explained that it was near Aol and Bayou. He replied that it was a good alternative to taking a cab. I thanked him and offered to cover the petrol costs. At least he declined. He explained that the company card would cover it. I placed my belongings inside and prepared for my vacation. He guessed that I was retired. I informed him that I had been retired for 30 years. He said, "I'm John Sykes." I repeated it. He said, "You can say it again." I agreed. Lisa received a ride home after texting him. He asked me what my plans were as he pulled into the driveway. I informed him that I did not have any. He seemed perplexed. "Fishing and hunting, enjoying time with my wife." "I hear you." He chuckled. "I retired from the army after 25 years as a lieutenant colonel. Retirements are not as idyllic as they are often perceived to be." "What do you do now?" I inquired. "I run a cameraman up north." He admitted, "Really?" I raised an eyebrow. I was unfamiliar with the occupation. "What is it for?" "It assists males in difficult personal situations." He explained. "Like what?" I inquired as to whether he would consider the issue of infidelity. He replied that he would, although he was sorry to say that he was already familiar with it. He proceeded to explain that they provide assistance to men in a variety of ways, including physically, mentally, emotionally, and legally. He then went on to say that this sounded rather intense. I commented that I would be interested to know how long the men in question typically stay. He replied that it could be anything up to 3 months, which seemed a rather short period of time. I then asked him whether he had ever been a drill instructor. He replied that he had, at Paris Island in South Carolina. I was informed that he had been promoted from sergeant to staff sergeant, indicating a familiarity with the organization's methodologies. His statements were noteworthy, and I developed a keen interest in the camp. I was granted permission to bring in a senior instructor to oversee the staff, welcome new students, and manage the curriculum. This information piqued my interest. I acknowledged that it seemed as if we had crossed paths for a reason. He congratulated Alan on his perceptiveness, noting that the corporation had been monitoring me for some time. He inquired as to why you are a local combat veteran with a remarkable record. He explained that, despite a few instances of involvement in bar situations, you are precisely what we require, and thus your company has been monitoring me. I inquired, somewhat warily, and he confirmed that we were awaiting your retirement. This work is ideal for you, offering superior remuneration and benefits, and you will report directly to me. I was intrigued and amused, but I inquired as to whether there might be a catch. He nodded and handed me a folder, requesting that I peruse the contents. I discovered a report describing my wife's affair with her school principal. McEnroe, Elroy, which lasted 2 decades, was a shock to me. I viewed the attached DVD, where I found this. I inquired as to where it had been found. "I will not sugarcoat the matter," Alan replied. "The company vetted you after I expressed interest in hiring you. Part of that involved your family life. I guess you were not aware." I lacked the knowledge to be taken aback. "How do you know it has been going on for 2 decades? "Our investigators are thorough." He stated that they've got the latest equipment. "They cobbled it together based on talks between your wife." Furthermore, McEnroe has been concealing the truth, which made it logical that she made numerous visits while I was abroad. "Elroy and I have spent half of the last 20 years together." I was suddenly struck by the realization of how terrifying this situation truly was. I then inquired about the children. He assured me that they were indeed his. I then asked how he could be certain of this. He confirmed that our investigators had linked the children's DNA to his. I then asked him if he had a sense that she was not going to meet me at the airport. He confirmed that she did, in fact, meet with the investigators after school on a daily basis. The investigators' schedule is as follows: they come to your house once a week to work on cases. They then drive home. This has been their routine while you are away. Tonight, they generally come to your house. I mumbled, "That's a 70-mile round trip just for a fling. How could she?" John shrugged and said that long trips mean time away from family. War alters people in ways we don't realize. It puts a strain on even the strongest couples. The question is, what now? If everything checks out, is divorce my only option? I finished JN. He nodded in agreement and said, "What about him?" I admitted that I wanted to break them apart, but I refused to risk going to jail. I will find another way. John informed us that the report contained all of the details. He is married with children who are ignorant of his romance with Lisa. I swore this was correct. John affirmed that if he had any doubts, he would not have shown us. I apologized, Gunny. You do not deserve this. So who does? I pondered. John agreed that we arrived at my house, which is set in a private. Your neighborhood is quite remote, he observed, taking pleasure in the view. I am grateful for that, I replied. My father constructed this residence. I hope that Lisa and I can reside here for the time being. I am the sole occupant at present, John informed me. Please contact me when you are ready to discuss further. I would be delighted to visit your camp, I said. We can converse, provide you with a tour, and answer any questions you may have about our profession. However, this matter takes precedence. I understand, I replied, indicating my comprehension with a nod. Thank you, John, for your consideration, I said, extending my gratitude for the opportunity to discuss this further. I accepted the offer and promised to contact him. We shook hands, and I exited the vehicle, taking my suitcase and garment bag. He turned around and drove away, while I proceeded to the front door. I relocated my belongings to the bedroom and arranged them in an orderly fashion. I was still in awe of what John had said and observed that everything was as pristine as could be, precisely as Lisa liked it. She may have been unfaithful, but her house was tidy. After putting everything away, I changed into my uniform, consisting of jeans and a t-shirt. I retrieved my folder and proceeded downstairs. I required further information regarding the contents of the report. I inserted the DVD into the player and activated the television. The scene depicted Lisa and Elroy in a motel room. When might you anticipate his departure? I am uncertain, it may not occur until he retires. She continued, suggesting that should one act judiciously, one might secure half of his retirement benefits and the majority of his 401k funds. Elroy added that this was her plan. I mumbled, fortunately, I have the prenuptial agreement she signed when my father died. The form was already prepared for me when we first married. All I had to do was write her name on it. I had heard enough and took out the phone directory. It was not too late, so I called to schedule an appointment with a family law attorney for the following morning. I scheduled an appointment with a family law attorney for the following morning. I proceeded to gather some of her belongings and place the bags near the door. I considered the possibility of ending the relationship, but ultimately decided to allow her to depart at her own discretion. I spent some time on the couch contemplating my life with Lisa. As far as I was aware, our relationship was stable and free of significant issues. A married couple does, but they always solve their problems. I always assumed that if she was going to cheat on me, it would be with someone much bigger than me. However, I could not believe that she would settle for a man who was not physically attractive. I actually laughed out loud when I thought about it. Nevertheless, in all the years we had spent together, I had never suspected that our sexual intercourse was causing her actual agony. I was surprised and delighted to discover that she had maintained her appearance of consistent trimness even after the birth of our children. I proceeded to my place of work and opened the cupboard holding my indoor tools on a shelf. There I found an unopened package of duct tape, comprising 2 rolls. As I observed these items, a thought occurred to me. I proceeded to take the duct tape and zip ties and close I approached the armament cabinet, opened it, and removed a pistol of undetermined caliber. I then returned to the dining room, laid out the items on the table, made a sandwich, and consumed a beer while awaiting their arrival. It was becoming dark when I heard a vehicle enter the garage. A few minutes later, I overheard the 2 of them. Lisa opened the door, laughing and conversing. Neither of them noticed me sitting at the table until they reached the main area of the house. Upon entering, Lisa's eyes widened, and she exclaimed, "Alan, didn't you receive my emails or messages?" She then inquired about my presence at the house, noting that my phone battery had died. Alan replied, "Trust me." I inquired as to whether you and Elroy intend to engage in sexual intercourse in our bed. Elroy gestured towards me, prompting me to raise my firearm. He became visibly startled, his eyes expanding and turning pale. It should be noted that the weapon was not loaded, and the magazine did not fit into the pistol grip. However, they were unaware of this information. He yelled, "Please do not do this." I observed a wet spot on the lap of his pants were soaked through. "You are a despicable individual," I said. "Do you believe you can get away with entertaining another man's wife for almost 20 years? I do not think so. Stand against the tree." I instructed him to position his back against it, hands behind his back. "Tie him to a tree," I ordered. "I just want to see his eyes and nose move." She took the order. The first roll was initiated and began rubbing it onto his skin in a soft manner. She urged him to proceed with greater haste, running around the tree and dispensing tape as she went. Upon the completion of the first roll, the second was tossed to her, with instructions to maintain the application of the tape. By the time she finished, Elroy was wrapped in duct tape and tied to the tree, with only his eyes and nose remaining visible. He was staring back at her. With mounting anxiety, I approached him and ascertained that he was unable to move. I then took a moment to glance into his eyes, smile, and retrieve my phone. I called his home number, which I had obtained thanks to the report John had provided. Judy, one of the McEnroe residents, spoke with a female voice on the other end. "Mrs. McEnroe," I explained, "is your spouse Elroy here?" "No, he has a meeting with the instructors at his school," she said. "Can I take a message and ask him to call you back?" "Mrs. McEnroe, that will not be necessary, but thank you anyway. I apologized for the deception, but the truth is that your husband is at my house with my wife. I believe you should come and retrieve him." I noticed Elroy's eyes widen even more under the tape. "What is he doing inside are you at home with your wife?" Judy inquired. They had planned to engage in sexual intercourse, but then reconsidered. "Are you certain about that? Is this a prank? Is this a joke?" I responded, "This is not a joke." They had been engaged in an extramarital relationship for over 2 decades. "I'm going to assault him," she declared. "I'm going to kick his rear end. I'm going to come and collect him," she continued. "Where are you located?" "Highway 95 runs east of AOL in Idaho." I informed him that I would provide him with directions. "Thank you, Mr. Roberts," she replied. "I will get there as soon as I can." After we finished talking, I sent her directions to my house and looked at Elroy, who was visibly more terrified than before. I informed him that I was going to have a quick conversation with my wife and asked if that was okay. I cautioned him not to go anywhere. "You hear me?" He attempted to shake his head, but the tape prevented him from doing so. I motioned for Lisa to go inside. She moved aside, and I followed her. When we entered the house, I signaled for her to sit on the couch while holding the TV and DVD player remotes. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. "Before you respond, understand that I am aware of much more than you realize." She spoke quietly for a while. I inquired as to the duration of the affair, and she responded that it had been ongoing for 20 years. I then asked her when it had commenced, and she replied that it had begun in approximately 1995. She stated that they had worked together for years but had never engaged in any sexual activity. When he was home, they only met when he was away, even when she was stationed overseas. She apologized for not disclosing the affair sooner and explained that she had not intended for him to discover it while he was engaged in combat operations against terrorists. "Furthermore, I was forced to witness your apparent enjoyment of this inferior item in our bed. I demanded that you answer the question." She began to sob, so I instructed her to stop. I then asked her to respond to the question. She wiped her eyes and nodded in affirmation. She pleaded with me, requesting that I give her another chance and help her get through this. I asked her if she was serious. I asked her to provide a compelling reason why I should not immediately dismiss her from the situation. She responded that she did not want me to use force. However, I knew she was lying. After hearing what she said to Elroy, it is too late for that. I informed her that I would be consulting with a lawyer the following day. She regarded me with anger. "You don't want to do that," she stated. Elroy had informed me that if I attempted to divorce her, I would lose half of my pension, the family home, and other assets. I responded with laughter and presented her with the prenuptial agreement. "You must recall the prenuptial agreement you signed several years ago," I said. "It remains valid and unbreakable. You will not receive anything if I can help it. Remember that I am the owner of the house. The parents bequeathed the property to me, and the prenuptial agreement stipulates the consequences of adultery. There is no cause for concern, I shall adhere to the terms of the agreement. You will receive 40% of our combined savings, but no assistance, and I shall retain all of my retirement funds. I shall contest your claim. I anticipated that you would make such a declaration. I pressed the remote control, activating the television. A video of her and Elroy appeared on the screen. Her face turned pale, and she covered her mouth with her palm. How did you receive it? Please turn it off. I shake my head. The manner of its acquisition is irrelevant. What matters is what your school board will do once they receive a copy of this. She glanced at me in disbelief. I'm going to lose my job, she explained. So will Elroy. Please, do not do this. So you'll sign the paperwork once you receive them. I inquired as to why she had not voiced her concerns over the years. She replied that she had initially enjoyed the relationship, perceiving me as attractive. However, she later began to experience discomfort, which led her to develop reasons for avoiding intimacy. I then asked her if she was truly sorry. She acknowledged this and proceeded to remove her keys from her purse. I confiscated her ATM and regular credit cards but retained her UK card. I was aware that she had a Spoken Teacher credit union account and made regular contributions of 10% of her income. If she required funds, she could utilize that account. I returned her purse to the couch. I presumed that I should pack up and depart. She murmured quietly, "Not now." I informed her that she still had some explaining to do. I advised her that she should inform her parents and our children of her actions so that they could understand the reasons behind our divorce. She pleaded with me, "Please do not make me do this. Why have you had no trouble cheating on me for the past 2 decades? Surely you are not ashamed of what you did." "They will loathe me," she cried. I replied, picking up the phone, that I was ready to call her parents when I noticed the gleam of headlights approaching the driveway. I assumed it was Judy coming to retrieve her husband. "Ah, Judy is here. Start by explaining to her why you entertained her husband." There was a knock at the door. I opened it and saw the woman who answered the door was of a similar age to me, and she was attractive. She was wearing tight-fitting jeans that were ripped at the seams. I was struck by the way she looked at me, and I felt that she was looking at me even more than I was looking at her. I asked her, "Are you Alan Robertson?" She stared at my lap and then said, "Yes, I am Judy McEnroe." I said, "For the time being," and she replied, "Yes, please." "Please come inside," I said as I opened the door. "Where is that disagreeable individual currently hiding?" she inquired. I smiled when she stated that she liked this woman right away. "He is currently feeling somewhat tense." "I can assure you that he isn't going anywhere," I said. Judy gazed at Lisa, her cheeks flushing with rage. "Are you currently having fun with my future ex-husband?" she asked. "Husband," she stated, her eyes widening in recognition of my wife. "It is you, Lisa Conroy. I should have known." "Please stop," Lisa shouted. "Shut up, you goddamn strumpet," Judy wailed. "I will kick your back by the middle of next week," she continued. "How do you do that? You are married to this stunning piece of man-meat and you are cheating on him. Him with a Pillsbury Doughboy." Judy paused to look at me. "Where is the unpleasant individual?" she asked. "I will escort you to him," I replied. "Wait," I said, walking to my office and opening the cupboard containing the duct tape. I soon discovered what I was looking for: a box cutter, a bottle of 90% isopropyl alcohol, and a clean rag that had once been a t-shirt. I returned to the front room and requested Judy to follow me. We proceeded outdoors, where I directed her attention to the tree where I had fastened Elroy. Judy was overcome with laughter upon observing that he was wrapped in duct tape. Roy was visibly distressed to see his wife, and I could discern panic in his eyes. "Your approach, Alan, will require a significant investment of time to achieve the desired outcome." I shook my head and placed the spork and towel on the ground. "That may not be the case," I replied. She raised her hand, indicating she wished to speak. "Wait a second," she said, stepping over to him and looking him in the eyes. "You are a despicable individual," she stated. As she removed her rings and discarded them on the ground, she stated, "You have not touched me in months, and now I understand why." She then proceeded to reveal her identity as the woman she believed I did not want to upset. I retrieved a box cutter and proceeded to cut the tape. I then took a step back and observed Lisa. Elroy collapsed to the ground. After being freed from his constraints, he writhed in pain. I instructed him to get up, and then urged him to get back inside the home. Elroy's presence had been a welcome diversion from the norm. Judy observed this as she watched him run inside. "Have you accomplished enough?" she pleaded. "No," I replied. "Call your mother and put her on." The speakerphone was answered by Lisa, who informed her parents that she was fine. When her mother responded, Lisa's mother became emotional. Lisa's mother asked what was wrong and whether she was hurt. Lisa informed her mother that Alan was kicking her out of the house. Her mother then inquired why he was doing this. Lisa became emotional and began to sob. As she proceeded, he discovered that she had been unfaithful to him. He was visibly annoyed by her actions and questioned her judgment. He wondered how she could have done such a thing to her husband. He expressed his disbelief at her behavior and asked her what was wrong with her. He did not blame him for kicking her out. He then asked her to stay with them. "I believe so, but not for too long," Lisa replied. She then warned her mother, "No males." "Thank you," her mother said. "Is Alan there?" "I am here," Lisa responded. She then informed her mother that she had been addressing her parents as Mom and Dad since they had married. "Are you all right, son?" she inquired. "I will be all right, Mom," I replied. "It will not be easy, but I will make it through." "I'm deeply sorry, Alan," Lisa's mother stated. "You were always very nice to her." "I'm not sure what got into her head," I said. "Please remain in contact." "I will." "This is not the first time this has happened," she said. "Please remain in contact." "I will." "This is not the first time this has happened," I said. "Please remain in contact." "I will." She terminated the call. I then turned to Lisa and said, "You have 2 additional calls to make, so please proceed." "Do not make me do it," she replied, her voice filled with emotion. "Why not?" I asked. "They deserve to know the truth," she answered. "Please get to it." Lisa then answered the phone and called our son, Carl. "Hello, Carl. It is your mother. Are you okay? Your father and I are getting divorced." "What happened? Did your father cheat on you?" "No, son. I cheated on your father. He found out." "How could you? I am your mother. I should have told you." "Is your father?" "I am here, son. I previously mentioned this to you, but I am fine. I simply felt that you needed to hear the truth. Your mother has been engaging in this behavior for almost 20 years. I only discovered this information today." "My godfather," he said, "I am truly saddened to hear this." "I apologize, Carl." She replied, "Yeah, I'm sorry you were." He said, "I am disconcerted by your actions towards my father. I must take my leave. I will contact you later." He terminated the call, and Lisa wept while seated on the couch. "I implore you, I beseech you, I entreat you," she said, her eyes red and puffy. "I will not tolerate any further calls," he replied. Lisa called our daughter's number. The call was similar to the others, but Renee was more outraged than Carl. She stated, "You foolish cow," after Lisa explained the situation. "I hope Daddy will terminate your parental rights." He is Lisa's words. "How could you be so?" Renee inquired, "Are you not my daughter at this moment? I am uncertain of your identity. You would be well advised to reconsider your actions, or you may find yourself deprived of contact with your grandchildren." "Goodbye," Lisa replied, her voice filled with emotion. Renee concluded the conversation, "Do you begin to grasp the consequences of your actions? The actions you have taken have had a profoundly negative impact on 2 families. I hope you are satisfied with the consequences of your selfishness. Toiletries and some of your belongings. You may make arrangements to return later with the rest of your belongings." Lisa walked upstairs, picked up the luggage and overnight bag I had placed near the bedroom door, and returned downstairs. Judy stopped her before she walked out the door. "Wait a moment. Second," Judy said, "if I understand correctly, your husband has been engaging in a romantic relationship with my husband for more than 20 years. Lisa cast a downward glance and muttered, "Yeah." She then asked, "So I suppose you won't mind if I engage in a romantic relationship with your boyfriend?" Judy smirked and replied, "It has been a long time since I was with a man who could be considered a real man, and you seem to be quite comfortable," Judy observed, regarding me with a curious gaze. "So, what are your thoughts?" "I am willing to accept some retribution," Lisa replied, her eyes brimming with tears. "You wouldn't," she pleaded, her voice laden with emotion. "I do not know." I gave a shrug, indicating that I was unsure. "It's the best offer I've received recently," I said. "Moreover, why should cheaters get all the fun?" Judy chuckled. "I suppose you have a point," Lisa conceded. Judy continued, "Do not forget to take out the trash. Do not enter the house. I do not care where you sleep. It could be the car or a motel. It is up to you. I do not want to see you again. The lawyer's appointment is scheduled for tomorrow." He nodded in agreement and whispered, "Crystal." As he walked towards the door, Lisa cast one last gaze at me. "Goodbye, Alan," she said, her voice laden with regret. With that, she turned and departed, leaving me to bear witness to her departure from the house and my life. We watched as Lisa drove away, my eyes brimming with tears. "You're okay?" Judy asked. "Yes, it was simply something in my eye," I stated, wiping it away. "Crap," she mumbled, yet she still managed to smile. I couldn't help but laugh. "So, how do you walk away from 30 years?" I inquired. Judy had advised people to be open to new possibilities. I nodded in agreement. "Did you truly not know any of this?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, I just found out today." While I was away, she continued her investigation. She inquired about my knowledge of the situation. I had my suspicions, but I had not yet confirmed them. She had used perfume on him and on his clothing. He was never caught. However, I had anticipated this outcome. "What are your next steps?" I asked. "I am not sure," she replied. "I have always been a stay. At this juncture, it is pertinent to inquire whether the subject in question has any further comments to add." She described herself as a homemaker and mother, stating that this was her lifelong ambition. She explained that her mother had taught her that the ideal role for a woman was to be a homemaker, and that she had married shortly after leaving high school and had never held a paid position. Her aim had been to keep her husband happy and to raise her children correctly, but she was confident that she would be able to resolve the situation. I inquired whether she was certain about her decision to end the relationship. She replied with a laugh, asking if I would like to stay over. "Are you certain that I would enjoy their company?" she inquired. I reassured her that I would not mind. That night, we made love. Prior to falling asleep, I inquired, "Why did you stay with him?" and then, believe it or not, I once adored him. She admitted that he was nice to her and the children. "You loved your wife," I acknowledged. "Correct," she replied. "Yes, I do. I acknowledge that a part of me will most likely always exist, but I will not allow her infidelity." She agreed. "The marriage is over," she stated. I was curious as to what would transpire next. She inquired as to whether I was referring to her. I nodded, and she proceeded to state, "I like you, Alan Roberts. I would like to see where this goes. I would enjoy that as well." I concurred, and she smiled. The following morning, she greeted me with a smile and inquired as to whether I wanted breakfast. I replied that I would love some breakfast. She then stated, "I have coffee brewing. What is on your schedule today?" I informed her that I had a lawyer meeting and some work-related activities listed. She began. "I'm going home after breakfast. Then I'll book my own lawyer appointment." She then proceeded to explain that she would see me downstairs. As she left, I proceeded with my morning ritual, showering and selecting my sophisticated uniform. I then proceeded to dress, ensuring that everything was in order, and made my way downstairs. Judy's eyes widened when she saw me. "Are you in the army?" she inquired. "No," I replied. "I'm in the Marines." I then made a correction, stating that I would be in the army for approximately another month. I informed her that I was on final leave before retiring. She inquired about the medals and badges on my chest. I responded that they were awarded for actions in a combat zone. She asked about the circumstances surrounding their bestowal. I explained that the Purple Heart ribbon with 3 stars was awarded for wounds sustained during combat. She asked about my combat experience. I confirmed that I had been wounded 4 times during combat. She asked about my service in the military. I recounted 6 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. She questioned the length of my military service. I responded that I had served over 30 years. I informed her that I had been on active duty for the majority of the time in question. She then asked if my wife had been unfaithful during my absence. I confirmed that she had. She then asked if I was aware of this. I replied in the affirmative. She then expressed her disbelief at my apparent lack of knowledge. After breakfast, we went outside. She requested that I call her once she arrived home. We then agreed that the lawyer's meeting had gone well. This was based on my evidence, which included the prenuptial agreement and financial statistics. The lawyer ruled that, given her income, alimony was unlikely. However, the property and pension were preserved. In accordance with the prenuptial agreement, the bank account must be shared. At what point would you like to file? I made it clear that I needed things done as soon as possible. He responded that he would take care of it as soon as possible. However, he noted that getting it to Washington may require some extra effort, but that they handle it on a regular basis. I will handle the paperwork preparation and filing. If everything goes well, we could finish it early next week. You will only need to pay the filing fee and my service fee. You may settle it with as I was leaving. The receptionist handed me a sheet of paper with a checklist to protect my interests. He hoped that my wife had not already acted at the bank. Upon reviewing the list, I noted that the bank visit was urgent, while the remainder could be managed online. I shook my head in response to his inquiries and confirmed that I had no further questions. He then handed me his card and shook my hand. He encouraged me to contact him if I needed anything and wished me good luck. I exited the building and paid the fees. After completing the requisite fees and prepayment, I departed on my journey. I contacted John from the vehicle after concluding my business with the lawyer. I informed him that I needed to address certain financial matters, but I was eager to discuss the position he had proposed. He assured me that he would be available and looked forward to our next interaction. Following our discussion, he sent me directions to the campground at the bank. I realized that Lisa had not yet accessed her account. I withdrew 60% of the funds and initiated a new account in my name. I also applied for joint credit cards. I terminated my marriage and paid off my balances. I then ordered new ATM and credit cards for myself. Despite the lengthier travel time, I traveled to the campground, which was around 35 miles northeast of my home. This allowed me to reflect on the situation in a single day. I went from being a comfortably married man planning retirement with my wife to discovering nearly 20 years of betrayal. 6 of those years were spent in a conflict zone, endangering my life. I recognized that I had dealt with Lisa's betrayal and I would address her in the same way I would an armed foe in warfare. Fortunately, there was only a duty to perform. I was reassured by her liveliness, honesty, and prowess in bed. However, I was hesitant to initiate any further contact with her immediately after terminating my relationship with Lisa. I eventually arrived at Camp Rollins with minimal traffic on the narrow road. I accelerated until I reached a gate manned by a camouflage-clad guard, armed and ready. I stated that I was there to see John Sykes as directed. I stated my names as Roberts and Allen. The guard then produced a JNK card and my driver's license. I waited for approximately 1 minute before the guard returned to the shack. He was engaged in conversation on a field phone. After a brief pause, he returned my paperwork. Commandant Sykes was awaiting me. Gunny Roberts welcomed me to Camp Rollins before I had the opportunity to thank him. He then proceeded to open the gate and wave as I drove past. I arrived at a military installation upon negotiating a few tight curves, I observed clean wooden huts surrounding a central space where soldiers were engaged in drills. The grounds were well maintained, with perfectly kept grass. Upon arriving at the camp headquarters, I was greeted by an attractive blonde woman who was professionally dressed. She smiled when I arrived. She informed me that I must be Sergeant Roberts, to which I agreed. She then said, "Welcome to Camp Rollins." She added, "Commandant Sykes awaits you. Would you like some coffee, black?" I replied that I would like coffee, black. "Excellent, I replied. She complied, and I was invited inside. I knocked, and he welcomed me in over the phone, noting his khaki uniform shirt decorated with silver oak leaves. I recognized his status in the army. After he hung up, he rose to greet me. "Glad you made it," he said. "Please take your seat." As I settled in, the receptionist gave me my coffee. "Thank you," I replied. "The taste is exactly what I needed." "No problem getting here?" he inquired. "None of your directions were correct." "Affirmative." I then proceeded to introduce our visitors, noting that each individual who enters the situation is, in fact, a victim. It is evident that they have all been deceived and have endured various forms of mistreatment, including physical, emotional, and psychological abuse, as well as betrayal and humiliation. He then added that many of these individuals could be perceived as weak, a sentiment that I respect, as it aligns with the value of honesty. These men often exhibit a lack of strength, both physically and mentally. Mentally, some individuals experience a sense of powerlessness with no other options for assistance. Unfortunately, the women with whom they are involved tend to exploit this vulnerability. I was taken aback by his revelations. "What is the recommended approach?" I inquired. John emphasized that the initial stage is to instill attention and enhance their physical strength. We restrict their internet access and prohibit the use of any technology, including cell phones, computers, and tablets, during their 3-month stay. During their 3-month stay, they are denied access to the internet, email, Facebook, and YouTube. I commented sarcastically that I was sure they would enjoy that. Prior to my arrival, he had agreed that some people were glued to their phones, completely unaware of their surroundings. We removed that distraction, forcing them to confront their difficulties. I inquired about the possibility of staying in touch with their families. John nodded and replied, "We will work that out." A mailbox address was assigned for correspondence, which was to be sent only via normal mail. Cattle deliveries are made twice weekly at the post offices in Bonners Ferry and Clark. It is quite a trek to get there, and efforts were made to avoid any problems from spouses. He added that there were armed guards, helicopters, and an electronic security fence around the camp. It was asked whether there would be any breaches if someone attempted unlawful entry. There were efforts, it was disclosed. John revealed that, fortunately, they had been prevented from doing so. An unfiltered briefing on this topic can be found in the packet he will provide. I have become accustomed to referring to myself as a teller term. I am curious to know more about the training plan I requested. Here is a brief overview of the packet's contents. It includes comprehensive information. I will send you home with the first months, which are often the most challenging for the students. John elaborated. In addition to abstaining from contemporary technology and the internet, the trainees undergo rigorous physical training comparable to that of recruit boot camps. The day commences at 0:50 with drills, and the pace is brisk with strict supervision. In the second month, students meet with their counselors, who provide intensive counseling to address their concerns, in addition to regular physical training and self. In the third month, students receive instruction in defensive tactics and are connected with legal professionals to address legal concerns. Before continuing, the instructor noted that a group session was currently underway and suggested the student might be interested in joining. The student agreed and accompanied the instructor to another building, where the instructor opened the door and indicated for the student to enter first. Upon entering, the student observed a group of males arranged in a semicircle. A semicircle of students was assembled before a female counselor, who was situated by the door. The instructor stiffened when JN arrived and then nodded at me, after which he resumed his seat. We sat silently in the back and observed one of the pupils describe how his wife had humiliated him, forcing him to serve her lovers by mouth and bottom while insulting his manhood. Tears welled up in his eyes, and his classmates comforted him by patting his shoulder. At the instructor, a physically imposing man with the insignia of a sergeant, I observed his outwardly calm demeanor, though his clenched jaw revealed his inner rage. As the student saw the counselor attend to him, I decided to join this group. I was determined to help these people in every way possible. After further counseling, John indicated for me to join him, and we left. He took me on a tour of the camp, highlighting its facilities. We proceeded to the instructor's quarters, where several individuals, attired in khaki shirts similar to John's, were gathered. Some bore insignia indicating the rank of sergeant, while others displayed insignia indicating the rank of staff sergeant. John assembled the group in the center and introduced me. I engaged in conversation with them for a considerable period of time and discovered that approximately half of the group had previously served as Marine Corps drill instructors, while the remainder had held similar roles within the Army. As our discussion progressed, it became evident that they constituted a close-knit group. The group is characterized by a strong sense of camaraderie and a genuine concern for the well-being of their pupils. One of the men inquired as to my interest in joining their team. I replied, indicating that I was indeed interested. The man, whom I later learned was John, smiled and announced that he had requested that I become their next senior instructor. He explained that the current senior instructor was on terminal leave but that he would like me to spend some time at the facility getting to know everyone. The others nodded their agreement. One man welcomed me aboard, remarking that he was pleased to have me join them. The remainder of the group agreed, and I thanked them. We then returned to our activities. I proceeded to John's office to discuss work-related matters and camp activities. John then prompted me to elaborate on my decision to join the organization following the unfortunate incident involving the aforementioned individual. I explained that I had come to recognize that such occurrences are not uncommon. I had previously assumed that such incidents were merely online stories. John expressed understanding and recognition of the prevalence of such incidents. I should also make it clear that the offer of employment is a formal proposal. You have a formal proposal, he added, laughing, as he handed me a document. I was startled by the company's offer of a salary significantly higher than what I earned in the military, as well as an excellent benefits package. I accepted the offer. Okay, John, said John, handing me a stack of files and some light reading to keep me occupied for the next few weeks. I laughed and replied, please feel free to visit at any time. You should absolutely attend the cow burning. I inquired about the ritual, and he informed me that it is a customary practice at the conclusion of each session. After bidding farewell, I collected my folders and returned home. The subsequent 3 weeks elapsed with remarkable swiftness. Lisa received and signed the divorce papers without objection, and the attorney informed me that my divorce would be finalized within 30 days. Meanwhile, Judy initiated divorce proceedings against Elroy, which would undoubtedly take a longer period of time. It has been approximately 90 days since that time. Since she filed in her native state of Washington, I have not heard from Lisa again, nor have I had any interest in doing so. Approximately 2 weeks after filing for divorce, her parents arrived to collect her belongings from the house, along with her personal items. I provided them with a cashier's check for her portion of the bank account, as well as all of our photographs of her. I have attempted to eliminate any reminders of her from the house. Lisa's mother stated that she was too embarrassed to face me. I stated that it did not surprise me. In the meantime, Judy and I spent the last 3 weekends together, and we had a great time. I took her fishing on Lake Pendry, which she enjoyed immensely. Unlike Lisa, Judy enjoyed fishing and even cooked the Chinook salmon we caught. I made it a point to visit the camp a few times a week and speak with each of the instructors I met. I realized that they are all military veterans and divorced. Additionally, there were fewer individuals initiating new relationships. Furthermore, I attended several group counseling sessions to gain a deeper understanding of the students' motivations for being there. Their stories were particularly impactful. I also discovered why the camp is highly secure. I continued my investigation, learning that one student had been targeted by an organization called Mace. He had escaped his wife and sought refuge at the camp, but Mace was determined to locate him. An armed assault on the camp was even attempted, but was stopped by watchful camp guards from an unknown federal agency. As a result, new restrictions were created, requiring any mention of Mace by a possible student to initiate contact with that agency. According to my investigation, the agency had been informed twice in the previous year about the months and John. They were offered the opportunity to attend the Corps burning ceremony, which marked the end of the 3-month program. The month-long program commenced with my donning of the Class C uniform and subsequent departure. The ceremony, conducted at night, was observed by John and me, as we watched as members of the class affixed images of their wives to a straw figure, which was then elevated and secured to a pole with rope. The pole's base was a heap of firewood. One of the pupils was summoned forward and provided with a lit torch. The teacher then commanded, "Set fire to the wood." I responded by directing the student burning the wood stack, and the flames rapidly consumed the straw effigy. As the figure burned, the participants became enraged, raising their fists and chanting. They continued this behavior until the figure was reduced to ashes. I inquired about the purpose of this display. John prompted me to ask about the significance of this ritual. He explained that it provides a sense of closure for the men involved and allows them to express their inner struggles without resorting to violence against their partners. Tomorrow, they will graduate, prepared to face the challenges of life. It is remarkable to consider that just 3 months ago, they arrived as individuals struggling with inner turmoil. By the end of the program, they will have gained a sense of emotional healing and resilience. I was invigorated and able to briefly imagine Lisa being tied and burned by fire. I smiled at the thought. "How are things at home?" I asked John. "I am making good progress," I replied. "The divorce will be finalized soon." "How are you coping?" he inquired. "I am doing okay," I reassured him. "Better than I thought." "Good to hear," he said. "Your end is in a few days." "Yes, I acknowledge," I replied. 3 days precisely. "Wonderful," he was enthusiastic. "I await your eagerness to meet our new students. They arrive in 4 days, and you'll need this." He continued to offer a small box containing a set of polished metal chevrons. I inquired as to his rank, and he confirmed that it identified him as a senior instructor. I congratulated him and thanked him. Over the next 4 days, I spent time with Judy Elroy and offered to purchase her half of the home, which she agreed to. It appeared as though he intended to move Lisa, which prompted Judy's haste to depart. I proposed that she move in with me, and she immediately agreed. As a result, I rented a trailer to assist with the transfer and moved her in with me while it was still comfortable. I was convinced that we would be able to manage. Judy observed as I prepared for my first full day at camp, offering a beautiful breakfast and a departing kiss as I left. She encouraged me to maintain contact. I admitted to being unsure of where my friendship with Judy might lead. I was open to trying it, but so far, she had expertly replaced Lisa's void. I was unable to recall feeling more satisfied when upon arrival at the campground, I proceeded to examine my appearance in the mirror, adjust my gear, and then strolled onto the porch to observe the group of men on the trail. I was immediately struck by the dearth of suitable candidates, as evidenced by the small gathering of males in the parking lot. It became clear that the quality of the incoming personnel was severely lacking, and I was compelled to take immediate action. I was left with no choice but to remove this unfortunate collection of individuals from my sight and begin processing them as soon as possible. I momentarily lost my composure. "Yes, Sergeant," the men acknowledged, leading the group to processing as they left. I turned around and noticed Jay's grin, which stretched from ear to ear. He complimented me on my excellent work and thanked me for listening to today's story. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe. If you haven't already, also write a comment below with your thoughts on what transpired. Take care.